Shalom, 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 shalom. This is the Defenders of the Way broadcast, and we have a live discussion today. The topic that we'll be discussing is Paul, the Torah teacher, apostle or apostate. Once again, that title is Paul, the Torah teacher, apostle or apostate. And I'm live here. I'm your host, Brother Sam Addison, and I'm with my brother here. This will be a brotherly discussion. My friend and brother Pacroseeno Lee, and from the Biblical Rumble Room. Those of you guys that haven't done so already, go ahead and subscribe to his YouTube channel, the Biblical Rumble Room. Also, subscribe to his page, sign into his page. I don't know what the terminology is called, but it's a Biblical Rumble Room group where we have very lively discussions, very interesting, very relevant, and live discussions. So I'm going to give Bro the chance to go ahead and introduce himself. And as soon as he does so, we will maybe take a quick break and post a link so that we can get some viewers in the room, and then we'll be getting started right away. It's on you, bro.
Yo, what's going on, guys? Shalom, shalom. It's your boy Pacro from the Rumble Room. Appreciate the introduction, Brother Sam. Yes, as the Brother Sam said, we are the Biblical Rumble Room on Facebook. Just search and type in Biblical Rumble Room. We're there. Lots of good discussion. You'll grow in lots of different ways. Definitely in biblical knowledge. But yes, here to represent the side of the debate, the critical perspective of Paul. So I'll be analyzing critically the writings of Paul, hopefully bringing some things that you guys will be able to think about, perhaps find useful in your discussions. I think whether you are a Hebrew that supports Pauline writings, or if you're a Hebrew that is critical of Pauline writings, you'll definitely find some really good rationales, some good exchanges, some good scriptures. So take note. And if you're a Christian, you might find this discussion useful as well. I'll be critiquing Paul's writings. So you'll find that we'll have a common position. We both would be disagreeing with Brother Sam Addison, but obviously myself and the Christian will be disagreeing for different reasons. I will be opposing Paul to communicate the point that Paul is indefensible for Hebrews. And perhaps actually the Christian might find that to be a common point as well. The Christian might find that, hey, Paul supports my doctrine, and if he supports yours, how do these scriptures line up with your perspective? Me talking about the Hebrew who supports Pauline writings. So if you find that you're speaking with a Hebrew, you may say, "Hey, Hebrew, I want to talk to you about these Pauline writings. How is it that you can defend them?" type of thing. So without further ado, I don't want to take up too much more time, but I guess we're gonna share this link and get this discussion around.
Cool. For those of you guys that's watching, please go ahead and do not forget to subscribe to the channel, the Defenders of the Way channel. Go ahead and like this video. Please share it. Those of you guys that are subscribing, make sure you hit the bell button so that you can be notified of all upcoming events. If you guys give us a moment, we will get right with you. We're going to go ahead and share this link. I see you, brother Vinny Davis. Peace, bro. Shalom. Always supporting the ministry. We appreciate you, bro. If you could share that link, share this link, in the groups that you're associated with, I would greatly appreciate it. So we're going to go ahead and take a couple moments and share this link, and we're going to get this discussion started. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Appreciate your patience. We are actually sharing the link, attempting to get some more viewers in the room. For those of you guys that are just tuning in, please go ahead and give us the thumbs up on the video. Help us get the message out. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that bell button so you can get notified of all upcoming events and presentations that we bring. Also, share this video if you will. We'll be with you in a moment. Okay, I haven't done this in a while, so um, it's only giving me options of a few groups here, so I don't know why that is, but okay, so that's good enough anyway. We can whenever you're ready, brother Pacroseeno, we can go ahead and begin.
Yep. All set.
Okay, so you want to start, bro?
Oh yeah, sure. So what? So a lot of Hebrews have been. A lot of you guys have been um, patiently waiting for this discussion. I think this discussion is long overdue. It's definitely a hot topic in the Hebrew community. But I think I see this discussion happening more on individual pages than in discussion groups. I think someone who's sort of seeing the whole playing field. I see definitely from spring until now, the discussion between Christians is sort of like, at least in the Rumble Room, like it's really starting to sort of come, like, wind down to a halt. There's less that Christians have to say, and so me always looking forward. I'm kind of seeing some opportunities where Hebrews should open up about the topics that we have in house. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing for the Christians to see it, namely for the reasons that I think at some point they're going to notice our community sort of moving on, and like just as we did from the Kemet debate. And I think that there are a lot of Hebrews that are closet Hebrews. They're sort of Christians but they're Hebrews in the closet. I definitely know that there are some Hebrews fancying with the idea of wearing fringes and chains and t-shirts. So and also keeping in mind that there are Hebrews filing out of church pews as we speak. People leaving the church just as you and I left the church, Brother Sam. So I think that as they see our discussion moving forward, especially in a functional, practical way, and that we're digging for the truth, I think it's super beneficial to see a conversation, whether you're a Christian and on the fence, or whether you're a Hebrew and you're looking for something to cut your teeth on, or something to mull around, or if you take the critical position of Paul, it's definitely going to put some arrows in your quiver. So peace and blessings to everyone who is viewing, and I hope that the discussion is edifying. I'm not sure if you wanted me to go ahead and state my position, or...
Yes, bro. Yes. Can you state your position and present your evidence?
Okay. So there's a number of ways that I sort of envision this going down. So my position is that Paul, he says some very anti Torah things, some things that are against Torah, and he also says things that are against things that aren't founded within the law and prophets. So let me close this. It's gonna be dinging all night. So basically, yeah. So so Paul says some anti-Torah things, and he also says things that are not founded in the law and prophets. So typically when I discuss Paul with Hebrews, my critical views of Paul with Hebrews, they cite verses where they think that he's defending Torah, and so in those cases, I have no problem with someone who says something in line with Torah. My issue is when someone says something that goes against Torah. And so my hope is to bring to light these heretical things in accordance with these anti-Torah things, or at the very least, cause Israelites to think about what it is they're reading when they read Pauline letters. So I can do this a number of ways. I can ask questions that I have about Paul, or I can sort of start with the wild beliefs and teachings that Paul holds. If I go down that list, I definitely imagine that I would have to go into the documents and explain them. There's about 6 points that I for sure want to hit. But what I can also do is ask questions. There's topics that I've sort of pulled up from the writings of Paul. That so when we go to certain passages of Scripture, for instance, Paul's views on uncircumcision, Paul's views on law and justification, Paul's views, Paul's explanation of Abraham and the promised seed. We can also talk about Paul's views on righteousness, sin, and law. Or I can just go down, for starters, the wild beliefs the problems that I have with Paul. So maybe I'll just start there. Some wild teachings of Paul's, things that I found. Paul said that a Greek believer was not compelled to be circumcised in Galatians 2:3. Paul refers to the law as bondage 4 times in Galatians. Galatians chapter, one second, let me close the door. Galatians chapter 2, verse 4. Galatians chapter 4, verse 3. Galatians chapter 4, verse 9. And Galatians chapter 5, verse 1. I find it highly problematic that a Torah teacher would refer to the law as bondage. It's really kind of a pejorative way to refer to the law. When I think bondage, I think Egypt. When I think bondage, I think Babylon, Persia. I think, the Greeks. I don't think the law of Elohim. My third point, Paul says that those who are under the law are under a curse, but that Christ redeemed and delivered us from that curse. We can derive that point from Galatians 3, chapter 3, verse 10 through 14, and Romans chapter 7, verses 1 through 6. Also, Paul suggests that uncircumcised individuals can become heirs of the Abrahamic promise inheritance. Okay, that can be derived from Romans chapter 4 and Galatians chapter 3. Paul also suggests that circumcision is of no benefit and that it even may compromise one's salvation. That can be derived from Galatians 5, verses 4 through 6, and 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 19. 2 more points. And then Paul says that we should be dead to the law and that we are delivered from the law. That can be derived from Romans chapter 7, verses 1 through 6, and Galatians chapter 2, verses 19 through 21. And then he says that to them, and so in 1 Corinthians 9 through 21, he says that to them that are without the law, which I reason to be lawless people, he became without the law, also lawless. That's just pulling from his statement in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 21. Also, I just wanted to I don't know if I should do this now because I don't want to use books that are sort of that you don't take to be Paul's writing. So, Brother Sam, before I continue forward, are there any biblical canonical books of Paul that you reject? Hello, can you still hear me?
Oh, my bad. I was on mute. No, I do not reject any books of the New Testament. Let me clarify my position there. I reject the authorship of some of the books that's in the New Testament. For instance, we scholars have long since known that Hebrews was not actually penned by Paul. A few of the other books were not penned by Paul either. They were most likely penned by one of his disciples. And so one of his followers that was following his tradition. So, a lot of individuals say, well, how you say you quote New Testament Bible verses and stuff from the Bible, but yet you don't accept Paul as the author. And it's just simple. I accept truth wherever it exists. Although Paul is not the author, doesn't mean I don't accept the truth that is in those books. But that's my position on that. I'll let you finish.
Okay, so just for clarification, so you reject 0 books that are in the Bible, but you make the stipulation that all the books that are traditionally attributed to Paul are not Paul's authorship. Can you state which books you believe are not of Paul's authorship?
I believe Paul wrote 7 books. I'll say the ones that he did quote. That he did write. Romans. Let me start. Galatians, Thessalonians, First Thessalonians, First Thessalonians, Galatians, Romans, of course. Philippians. What's the other P? Philemon. First Corinthians and Second Corinthians. Those are the books that I hold that Paul actually wrote himself, that he actually penned himself. All the other books are either up for debate or it is absolutely clear that he did not write them.
Okay, so just to be clear, Ephesians, Colossians, Hebrews, Titus, and Timothy, you would argue are not authored by Paul.
Right. None of the pastoral epistles do I hold as being authored by Paul.
Okay. Now, how do you view their veracity? You would confirm them as true and inspired books?
I would take the truth that's in them and match that up with the Tanakh, that which is written in the Old Testament, as to the truth of those books.
Okay, so they're not necessarily true, so long as they're true, but they may not necessarily true depending on how they line up with the Tanakh. Is that what
No, that's not what I'm saying. I take all the books, my position is that I take all of the New Testament books and measure them up, because the New Testament is just principles. They are principles outside of the words in red, which Hamashiach spoke himself. Everything else are principles that's based on Old Testament precepts. So I take Peter's writings, because what we have to realize is that the book has been translated, and there's a lot of what we call errors in the book. Grammatical errors, doctrinal errors that was added in. They are called textual variants. According to the scholarship, where some things has been added in, they're not in the oldest and best manuscripts. So it behooves all serious students of the Bible to take anything that comes out of that New Testament and measure it up with the Tanakh, which we're supposed to be doing here tonight.
Okay. So just for clarification, because I don't want I don't want to cite a book that you don't attribute to Paul.
You can cite any book, bro, that you want, because the books that you're going to talk about, Ephesians, First and Second Timothy, Second Thessalonians, all of those books, although they were not written by Paul, authored by Paul, in my opinion, they still come from the Pauline tradition. So it was most likely a disciple of Paul who was writing those books. So they're representing the Pauline view. So you can use any of those books that you like.
Okay, so even the books that do say I, Paul, and are assigned Paul, even some that include Paul's name from in the beginning and in the end, you would say that those books are not authored by Paul?
Yes.
Okay, and so would you also say that these books would you say that they do not how can I say this? Because if they're written by someone else, there's a chance that they might not reflect Paul's like are they written from the mind independently from a disciple, or do they reflect something that Paul would say? Could we cite them as if Paul actually said them?
No, not in my opinion. It's the disciples' opinion of what Paul has said. And the reason how we know, one of the reasons in textual criticism that we know that Paul did not write some of these books is because the difference in theology that's there. There's a little bit difference in theology in some of the writings of Paul as compared to the 7 that there's no dispute among scholarship that he actually did write. So yeah, there are some theological differences between those books which Paul did not or most likely did not write, and the 7 books which all scholars, pretty much there's a consensus among them that he did write. And I want to say peace, shalom to brother Welsh Fair out there, AWOLMMA in the building. Say peace to you as well, bro. Welcome to the platform.
Okay, so, and shalom to the brothers coming in. Glad you can make it. So I just want to be sure. So it would stand to reason that that there are some books that do not reflect Pauline teaching, but a teaching of the disciple, even though it's signed Paul. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there's some books that do not correctly and expressly represent Paul's theological paradigm. So yes, but those books are written in the spirit of Paul. So we'll deal with that. I don't want to make this a discussion and get off of the topic. I don't want to make this a discussion of authorship and textual criticism. We will have to get into a bit of that, but I certainly want to deal with the topic here. We have people that are, came to hear us discuss whether the doctrines of Paul, and I understand where you're going at. If it's not Paul, then, you don't really want to use those. So let's do this here. Let me see if I can share my screen, and so that the people out there can know that Sam didn't just make this up. This is not something that I'm making up. This is, a theological perspective. It's one that deals with textual criticism that has been, debated and argued for centuries now. So for those of you guys out there, I'm gonna attempt to share my screen. Go to your Google and simply type in how many books of the Bible, did Paul actually write? Bible did Paul actually, and I'm typing it in. I know I'm not sharing my screen right now. We'll share it in just a second. Paul actually write. Okay. So now, when you type that in, right? Let me see if I can share my screen here real quick for you guys. Share screen. Sharing screen is easier with 2 monitors. I don't have that. Sharing screen works best on a good computer. I guess this is good. Okay, share screen. Hopefully you guys can see this. Oh, well, it's not even shared yet. Share entire screen, right? Entire screen. Share. Right?
I
Did I
think
do
you
that?
can. There you go.
Okay. So it's looking kind of funky here. Is that
So if you click on the tab where you want to go.
okay? Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Okay. Now I just simply typed in how many books of the Bible did Paul actually write, right? Because I get a lot of flack from the Christian apologists saying, well, he's quoting from Pauline epistles and he don't even believe in Paul. That's not my position. That's why I'm here to defend the doctrines and the theology of Paul. So just to make that clear, because we didn't get to say that in the beginning, I am defending the doctrine of Paul. I am defending Pauline theology, and my brother here, Pacroseeno, is actually refuting it, attempting to refute it. So now we click on this first tab here, right? And it says, is this the one I want? I don't know, become study member, view this answer. I don't want to do any of that. So why is it? Oh boy, why is it doing this? Okay. So now let me go to another link or something. Maybe that one is not it. Answer, Paul authored 13 and possibly 4 books. These books include, how many books did Paul actually write? Gotquestions.org. Pauline epistles there. Most scholars agree. Here we go. This is Wikipedia. So it's a readily available source, right? So hopefully I'm still screen sharing here. Now let's see what this says. Let's see if Sam made this up, right? The Pauline epistles are also called epistles of Paul, letters of Paul, are 13 books of the New Testament attributed to Paul the Apostle, although authorship of some is in dispute. Among these letters are some of the earliest extant Christian documents. They provide an insight into the beliefs and controversies of early Christianity. As part of the canon of the New Testament, they are foundational texts for both Christian theology and ethics. The epistles to the Hebrews, although it does not bear his name, was traditionally considered Pauline for 1,000 years, but from the 16th century onwards, opinion steadily moved against Pauline authorship. A few scholars now ascribe it to Paul, mostly because it does not read like any of his other epistles in style and content. Notice that that's going to be a consistent theme, and this is one of the methods of how we determine which books Paul actually did write. Most scholars agree, here we go, that Paul really wrote 7 of the Pauline epistles. See that word? Most scholars. And you can click on these numbers here and it'll give you references. One of the scholars who I follow pretty much, Bart Ehrman, and he wrote a book called Forged, and that's a very good book to get for you Bible students out there, and it gets into the textual critic analysis of each one of these books, right? Most scholars agree that Paul really wrote 7 of the Pauline epistles, but that 4 of the epistles in Paul's name are pseudepigraphic. Ephesians, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus. So these are the books that we consider pseudepigraphal books, which, Paul didn't actually write himself, the pastoral epistles and all of that. I will be doing a teaching on this later. I want to get into this topic, so I don't want to take the time on authorship. Scholars are divided on the authorship of 2 of the epistles. And so here we have it here, where you guys can see that I didn't actually make up this stuff and say that Paul just didn't write these. So if you wanted to get these, the 7 books, that would be Galatians, Thessalonians, 1 Thessalonians, because there's a dispute about 2 Thessalonians. So Galatians, 1 Thessalonians, Colossians, Philippians, Philemon, Romans, and 1st and 2nd Corinthians.
Okay. Is it okay if I speak, Brother Sam?
Go ahead, bro.
Okay. Thank you for setting the record straight on that, Brother Sam. I think it's a very important point that we should clarify for our conversation's sake, but also for the respect of the viewers who should be aware about our particular the limits of our conversation regarding Paul's writing. So for instance, why wouldn't I cite Ephesians? Why wouldn't I cite Second Thessalonians? Why wouldn't I cite certain books? I think that the viewers should be aware of why I wouldn't cite certain books, and so I'm going to respect that, and I'm going to stay away from certain books that you wouldn't attribute to Paul's authorship. So what I will do is I will limit my citation of Paul's writings to the books of Romans, the letter to the Romans, the letter to the Galatians. I will use 1 Corinthians, and also, did you say Philippians was a game?
Yes, Philippians and Philemon.
Okay, so I will also cite from the letter to the Philippians. All the rest, for the sake of the integrity of our conversation, I wouldn't want any of my points to rest on documents that you don't respect as Paul's authorship. So I will omit those from any of my argument points, and I will limit them to the books, the letters I just stated that you do attribute to Paul's authorship. Okay.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so would you like to take this by topic, or would you like to respond to any of the points that I stated about Paul's wild beliefs?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and state my position.
Okay.
My position is this. Peter actually told us that that Paul's writings, some of Paul's writings, are hard to understand. The exegesis that he gives of Torah, in my opinion, and the Tanakh, are hard to understand. He also called Paul a beloved brother. So now my position is that if you do away with Paul, then you got to do away with Peter as well, because he was a liar, and he co-signed a liar and a deceiver. Also, you would have to do away with the books of Luke and Acts, because Luke actually wrote Luke and Acts, and Luke was a traveling companion of Paul. So that would make Luke and Acts, invalid as well. So based on those three things, not alone, there are more than three things, but based on these things, to me, it makes it illogical for anyone to say, well, I don't believe in Paul. Paul was an apostate, when in the book of Acts, according to Luke, the Kahal, the congregation, received Paul. They gave him what we call the right hand of fellowship. Luke penned his book of his writings of Acts. Most of the book of Acts is about Paul's ministry. Once again, 2 Peter chapter number 3, Peter calls Paul a beloved brother, and says that, there's a lot of people that wrestle with the scripture that Paul writes about in his writing. But they do that because they do not understand scripture, which is the Old Testament. That's a problem. They become unstable because they do not have a mastery of the Tanakh, which is also known in the Christian world as the Old Testament. So that's my position there. My position is that if you really have a understanding of Tanakh, if you have an understanding of the context of Paul's writings, then you will find out that there's no discrepancy between what Paul said and what the rest of the apostles said, going right back to the source, which is Hamashiach himself, whom the world calls the Christ. There's no discrepancy there. Paul was saying the same thing that Hamashiach was saying himself. And so that's my position. And Hamashiach was saying that which is based in Torah. And so that's my position, bro. And I guess from here, we can go ahead and kind of break this down, because you gave a lot of different things. So let's just take one thing, narrow it down, put the text on the screen, and, state your argument about it, if you will. And we can take it from there, bro.
Sure. I'm glad you mentioned the point about Torah context, and if you understand Torah, then you'll be able to understand Paul. So, being that it is that you are versed in Torah and the letters of Paul, I'm hoping that you can successfully explain some of these Pauline documents. And so we can start with Paul said that a Greek believer was not compelled to be circumcised. Why did he say that, Brother Sam?
Can we put that text on the screen, bro?
Yes, it's going to be. Did you want to, or I don't? It might be. Let me see if I'll try to do it.
I'll do it. What text you talking about?
We can go to Galatians chapter 2.
Galatians chapter number. Wait, my screen is messing up here. The book of Galatians chapter number 2. Okay, I don't think I shared my screen here, so let me try this again. Share screen. I see you in the building, Sister Natasha Leggett. Appreciate you coming out, checking out the video. Share screen. Share screen. Okay. All right. So I share the entire screen, I think, and share. Okay. Now we go to. I am using the Blue Letter Bible here.
That's fine.
All right. Which verse you looking for, bro? Titus with me. Okay. Then 14 years after I went up again to Jerusalem with Barnabas and took Titus with me also. And I went up by revelation and communicated unto them that gospel which I preached among the Goyim, but privately to them which were of reputation, lest by any means I should run or had run in vain. Neither Titus, who was with me, being a Greek, was compelled to be circumcised. Is that the text you're looking for?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that because of false brethren unawares brought in, who came in to spy out our liberty, which we have in Hamashiach, that they might bring us into bondage. Now, what's your issue here?
Why did Paul say that a Greek believer was not compelled to be circumcised?
Because the Torah doesn't command the Goyim to be circumcised. Where do you find that a Goyim must be circumcised to sojourn with Israel?
Well, according to the ancestral covenants, we can go to Exodus 12:48. If say Titus, Titus was to partake of the in the feasts, he would be an heir. Also, according to the ancestral covenant, the Abrahamic covenant, he was commanded to circumcise his whole house, the native born or the sojourner. So I'm wondering why Paul is not taking Titus to be. Why is he reluctant to circumcise Titus, and why is he saying that Titus is not compelled to be circumcised?
Okay, let's get this text that you're talking about. Exodus chapter number 12. Let's start at
verse 48.
Verse 48.
That's the meat of it, but you can start wherever you want.
Okay. Yeah. So let's see. Let's start at for the sake of time, 47. And all the kahal of Yasharal shall keep it. And when a stranger shall sojourn with thee and will keep the Passover to Yahuwah, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it. And he shall be as one that is born in the land, for no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. One law shall be to him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that sojourneth among you. Thus did all the children of Yasharal, as Yahuwah commanded Moshe and Aharon, so did they. So now your argument here is that because Titus, who was a Greek, was not compelled to be circumcised to be a part of the congregation in the New Testament under the New Covenant, that Paul was teaching heresy. Is that your position?
Right. Like why didn't Paul compel, why didn't he say, hey Titus, let's go get circumcised? Why was he reluctant? Yeah, why did he say he was not compelled?
Okay. Once again, here we're talking about keeping the Passover, keeping the feast, and all of those things which the temple was due to be passed away within 5 years, right? Within, I'm not sure if it's 5 years or this time, but within 5 years of the writings in the book of Hebrews, Paul had knowledge that the temple would be destroyed. The temple being destroyed would pretty much change the dynamics of how we keep the feast and the Passovers and all of those things. And so Paul was preparing the congregation the same way Hamashiach did. Hamashiach came at the opportune time, because in 70 AD, the temple was destroyed. So at that particular juncture, that makes it no one of us can actually keep the Passover or any of the feasts as it is stated here in this text in the book of Exodus, because you have no temple. So there was no need for Titus to go to the temple or anything like that, because within a few years, the temple was going to be destroyed. And we know that this was a doctrine of Paul because we got his disciple in the book of Hebrews. Let me go ahead and get that. I think it's Hebrews. Let me type this in. Hopefully I'm still sharing my screen here. Okay, it did something here. Oh, this is not going to work. I got to go to my other keyboard here. Okay, so ready to pass away. Okay. So now, when we go to this book in Hebrews, we're going to find out that Paul realized that none of Israel, either the bloodborn or the those that would be grafted in as Titus, the Greek, would be able to keep the feast of the Most High as it is in the book of Exodus. One, because there's no temple. We wouldn't have any temple there for us to be able to thoroughly keep the feast as we find in the book of Exodus. Give me 1 second here. It says there is no concordance. Let me go to Hebrews. I think it's going to be around chapter number 9 or 5. So let me see this. Let me get it in my, vanish. That's the word I'm looking for. Vanish.
Ready to vanish away.
Right. Ready to vanish away. So then we type this in here. Hopefully you guys are following this. Hebrews. Here we go. Hebrews chapter number 9. Once again, Hebrews was not written by Paul. It was written by a disciple of Paul. But we can get an insight into some of the teachings of Paul in that regard. We're at Hebrews chapter number 8, verses number 13. In that he saith, a new covenant he have made the first old. Now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. So all of the Levitical sacrificial accoutrements and laws and all of that other kind of stuff, Paul was prophesying this long before the event happened. actually the book of Hebrews, which was written somewhere around 65 AD, was written about 5 years before the temple itself was destroyed, and the priests scattered. So there would be we when we keep the commandments, we're keeping it, which is the word, when we keep the commandments, it's the Hebrew word which means to guard, to shamar, to guard, which means to protect. That's what it means to keep the commandments. Now we know for certain, and we have to understand this, because a lot of the Christian apologists try to trip a lot of our brethren up on this. And so Paul here in this text, in the book of Hebrews, is showing that he knew that the temple was going to be destroyed, that no one was going to be going to Jerusalem, traveling to Jerusalem.
Did you just say Paul? Did you just say Paul said that?
I said Paul knew this, and this disciple of Paul who wrote this book in 65 AD, about 5 years before, is writing this writing based on what he was taught by Paul. Right? You follow that?
Okay. Yep.
Okay. So now in that he said, for new covenant, he have made the first old. Now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. This prophecy actually took place 5 years after this book was written. So that we know that Paul was teaching this, it just logically follows that if this disciple, I think Paul died in 64 under Nero. So Paul was most likely dead at this time when this book of Hebrews was written. So this is actually a disciple of Paul who is promulgating the teachings of Paul as he see it. And he's stating in this writing that according to the teachings and doctrines that Paul was teaching, he was telling them that, listen, this temple is going to be destroyed. The Levitical priesthood is going to be scattered. And there's no way that you're going to be able to actually do. Notice I said do, not keep. Because we keep the commandments. You got to understand that as well. Keeping the commandments means to guard and protect. It does not necessarily mean to do everything in the book. It means because we cannot go to the temple 3 times, 4 times a year, because there is no more temple.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Do you believe that circumcision is a commandment that we should guard?
Yes.
Okay, so circumcision in regards to the sojourner should be kept, isn't that right?
Right.
Okay, so my question is, you're dealing with the temple. I'm just dealing with circumcision. At this particular time, when Paul is with Titus, there is the temple does exist, and sacrifice is one thing, but I'm talking specifically about circumcision. So whether the temple is standing or it's destroyed, do you? I mean, and at this time, I mean, we really should just consider the condition that the temple is still standing. But considering that the temple is still standing at this time, you don't think that the commandment of circumcision should be kept with regards to Titus?
Well, here's the problem that you have, bro. Where does it tell you that Titus partook in the Passover?
Okay, so if Titus, if you believe that Titus was never to take part of any of the feasts, then that's fine. We can move on, because there's really I'm not going to argue something that's not within the text. It's just when I read that Titus is a believer and I read that Paul is an Israelite, I believe that, you know, typically, like, if you're going to invite someone into a faith, of course they would take part in a feast. But to your defense, it doesn't say that Titus had any intention to keep the feast. So we can really move on if you'd like.
Okay, it's up to you, bro. I mean, this is your question session where you want to bring out the issues that you have with Paul. So what I'm showing you is that, number one, there's no evidence that Titus even was attempting to keep the Passover and to travel to Jerusalem to do those things. There's no evidence of that. That's number one. Number two, I just illustrated that Paul had specific knowledge that that temple was going to be destroyed, and the whole priesthood around which the feasts were surrounded would be gone. And so everybody had to improvise and adapt at that particular juncture. That is within 5 years of the book of the writing of the book of Hebrews, which was written in the 65 AD.
Okay, perfect. So you mentioned something. You said that circumcision should be kept. Okay, I'd
Right.
like to maybe move into some of Paul's writings regarding circumcision.
Okay. Now, before you go there again, bro, take a look at this. Paul took Timothy to the council. The 21st chapter of the book of Acts is what Galatians 2 is referring to, right? The council of Jerusalem in 60 AD, right? Now get this. If you got a beef with Paul telling Timothy not to be circumcised, then you got to have a beef with Peter and James that was there that gave the order for him not to be circumcised. So now is Peter and James teaching heresy as well?
Well, as far as Peter and James's approval, I think that's definitely a conversation to be had. I'm not concerned with Peter and James, although if I'm going to speak on it, I think that part of the curses in the towards of the captivity was that there would be confusion. And I think that there is definitely some confusion. And I'm not afraid to attribute that confusion to Peter, who is, I think, in tradition in the Gospels, he kind of wavers. You see him on Paul. He's kind of on Paul's side in Acts 15, but then he separates from Paul in Galatians 2. You see his endorsement of Paul in his second epistle. So I'm not really moved when it comes to seeing the sort of variance that happens with Peter and James. In Galatians 2, Paul says that he's commissioned, he's sort of given approval to the gospel of uncircumcision. Now, me knowing Torah, I'm like, why is there a gospel of uncircumcision? I do also consider that Peter and James are very simple men, who, from my impression is that they didn't go to school to learn letters. Okay, so whatever they got was from Hamashiach or whatever they got during their lifetime. They may not have been experts of the law. I'm also considering who of the apostles was a certified legit Levitical priest, because those are going to be your experts regarding the law. So when I see these guys waver, I'm considering that reality, that possible reality.
Okay, now let me respond to that, bro. You asked who among them would be the expert. That would be the guy you going against, Paul. Paul trained under Gamaliel as far as being a Pharisee of the Pharisee. So he would have had more knowledge of the law and the statutes than Peter, James, and John put together.
Well,
right?
Paul's in dispute right now. So
okay, no. Let me finish. So you asked who among them would be the expert, and that would be the guy that you're going against. That's number one. Number two, Galatians chapter number 2 tells you that Paul submitted himself to the orders of Peter and James. That's confirmed in the book of Acts chapter number 15 and Acts chapter number 21. So now if Paul is submitting his gospel message and his teachings to the approval of Peter and James, who are responsible for the decisions that came out of those councils?
If Peter and James are who Paul is submitting his teachings to, why would he be appealing to their knowledge? He would have knowledge himself. Hold
on, bro. Let's go to the text, bro, because we're doing a lot of talking and not a lot of. Just give me 1 second. I'm gonna pull up the text.
We can talk about this, but it doesn't negate the fact that there are lots of teachings in Paul's writings. We can shuffle around this if you want, or we can engage in the actual text.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to the text right now. You quoted Galatians chapter number 2, and I'm going to show you exactly what he said. Now watch this. Then 14 years after I went up to Jerusalem with Barnabas and took Titus with me also. And I went up by revelation and communicated unto them who? Peter, James, and John, that was there, and the elders at Jerusalem, right? Unto them that gospel which I preached among the Gentiles, but privately to them which were of reputation, lest by any means I should run or had run in vain. You know what this text is saying? I took to them and told them the gospel that I was preaching because I wanted to make sure if that gospel was the truth. And I didn't want to be telling folks stuff that was not true and running in vain, my ministry in vain, because the head was James, not Paul, not Peter. The head of the Kahal was James.
Right.
And James was called the just. And you know why they called him the just? He was called the just by the unbelieving Yahudim, because James was a stickler for keeping the commandments. He was known as being a righteous one that kept the commandments.
Can I ask a question?
And guess what? So here's my point. If this is your argument that because they didn't circumcise, or because Paul didn't circumcise Titus, the order came from James and Peter. So then by that same logic, you would have to say, I'm throwing away Peter and James's writings because they gave Paul a heretic doctrine.
That's not. Let me respond to that.
Go ahead, bro.
I don't think that's true at all. I'm acknowledging James and Paul and Peter's there's room for errancy. Like they're allowed to make mistakes. They're simple guys. Now, Paul was a traveling person. He wasn't the resident scholar for as far as my impression is. Like Paul travels. Okay, the elders are sort of stationary in Jerusalem. Now, if you want to talk about Galatians, it's not a couple verses further that Paul talks about how even though he was commissioned by Peter, James, and John, he ends up railing against Peter after Peter splits. When certain men came from James, they all split from Paul, and there was a big commotion.
Oh, we're going to get into that, bro, because we got to understand that, because that's a key to understanding what Paul was talking about.
Yeah, so there wasn't.
Do you want to get into it now, or you want to get into it later?
We can get into it. We can get into it now, or we can get into it later.
Let's go now. Let's go now. Since we're already here, let's take this text, and I'm going to take this opportunity to show you something here about what Paul was dealing with. Because you're saying Paul is teaching against the law. That's the same position that a lot of Christians have. How do I share my screen here again? Oh my God. Oh, I got to go back to the thing. Am I still sharing? Oh no. Okay. So screen share here. Now let's get into this text. Now we're getting into the meat of this stuff. I'm glad you mentioned that, right? I'm glad you mentioned that. Let's go to Galatians chapter number 2. We're going to read this, right? Galatians chapter number 2. For those of you guys that's watching, we're in Galatians chapter number 2. We'll start at verse 4 because we've read the rest. And that because of false brethren, unawares, brought in, who came in privately to spy out our liberty, which we have in Hamashiach Yahshua, that they might bring us into bondage, to whom we gave place by subjection. Remember I told you? No, not for an hour. That so I was there, there more than an hour, and I subjected myself to what Peter and James and John and the rest of the elders were saying. So once again, if you're saying this is Paul's doctrine and Paul is a heretic and an apostle and an apostate, then you got to place the same charges against Peter and James. To whom we gave place by subjection, no, not for an hour, that the truth of the gospel might continue with you. But of these who seem to be somewhat, these folks who everybody, James and Peter, they control the church, that folks that they bow down to, whosoever they were, it maketh no matter to me.
I'm sorry, where are you reading from?
Galatians 2 and 6. I'm at verse 6.
Okay.
But of these who seem to be somewhat, whatsoever they were, it maketh no matter to me. Alahayim accepteth no man's person. I'm not showing respect to person just because these folks are here. I'm preaching the true gospel. And so, it didn't matter. Folk were saying, oh, you got to go see Paul. You got to go see Peter now. He about to tell you. They didn't change nothing that I said. For they who seem to be somewhat in conference added nothing to me. Remember in the book of Acts chapter number 21, it said they took Paul in, in privately and to hear what he was teaching, because they already gave him orders in Acts chapter number 15, written orders that came from the hand of Peter. Peter and James and all the elders at Antioch. They gave a letter specifically stating that the Gentiles did not have to be circumcised. That came from Peter and James, and was given by letter to Paul. So once again, if you're going to blame Paul, you got to go straight to the source, which is James, because James was the head of the Kahal, not Paul.
So why don't we deal with Paul's writings? Why don't we deal with Paul's writings? He said
this is Paul's writing, and we get ready to deal with it right now. You brought up something.
Let's go.
Okay, let's go. But contrary-wise, when they saw that the gospel of the uncircumcision was committed unto me, as the gospel of the circumcision was unto Cephas. For he that wrought effectually in Cephas to the apostleship of the circumcision, the same was mighty in me toward the Goyim. And when James, Cephas, and John, remember I told you that, who seemed to be pillars, perceived the grace that was given to me, they gave to me and Barnabas the right hands of fellowship. And guess what? This is Paul saying that. How do we know that Paul was telling the truth? Because Luke confirmed it in the book of Acts. So once again, if Paul is lying, then Luke is lying. And so now we got to throw away all the Pauline epistles. You got to throw away Luke and Acts at the same time. All right. The right hand of fellowship, that we should go to the heathen, and that they unto the circumcision. Only they would that we should remember the poor, the same which I also was forward to do. Here we go. Key verse. Let me make this bigger, because we certainly want to get into this, because this is going to illuminate a whole bunch of stuff and eliminate a whole bunch of stuff at the same time. But when Cephas was come to Antioch, I withstood him to his face, because he was to blame. In other words, Paul rebuked Peter. Yeah, he absolutely did. We about to find out why. For before that certain came down from James, he did eat with the Goyim. But when they were come, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing them which were of the circumcision. So now let me exegete this for you guys. Here's what was going on. Peter was eating with Gentiles. He was sitting at the table with the Goyim, the Gentiles, and he was eating. Then when James the Just came down, because James the Just was not only keeping.
Oh, hey, hey, Sam, look, if you want to read the whole book.
No, I'm not gonna read the whole book, bro. Let me finish this. Give me 2 minutes to finish this, and then you can rebuttal. You brought this up, bro, and I asked you, did you want to get into it? And yes.
You know Galatians. We're talking about, if you know Galatians and you know Romans, let's get right to the meat of the text. We don't need to read a whole chapter.
Okay,
that's not necessary.
It is necessary, and this is why you have a
misunderstanding. This book.
I'm gonna let you finish.
If you know this book, let's get right to the verses and let's expound on it. I don't like who. Why are we reading the whole books? This is, you know how long this is gonna take?
Can I answer that?
Sure.
We're reading the whole book because you need the context in order to understand the verse. The reason why you have a misconception and eisegetically misinterpret the text, just like Christians do, is because you don't read the book. That's why you don't read the chapter.
Okay, so do this.
Let me finish. It's called context. So what I'll do to compromise, bro, I'll try to be brief and get to maybe 2 or 3 verses before and 2 or 3 verses after. But in dealing with this, we're going to have to do this because you have to put the text in its proper context. Is that all right?
We haven't even dug into the questions that I have.
Bro, you brought up an issue. You brought up
you
the
are
issue.
so familiar with Paul's text, you shouldn't have to read through the whole chapter.
I'm familiar with it, but there's a lot of viewers that are not, and you apparently are not either. And so in my,
What you think?
but you just said that though. You just said that you
what?
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Now let's deal with this.
I said what? What did I say?
You said.
You said I said. What did I say?
Can I tell you before you cut me off, bro?
Go ahead.
Can we do this decently in order, bro?
No. You said I said something. Tell me what I said.
You said, like in Galatians, chapter number 2, the same chapter, Paul and Peter has a beef, and they got a disagreement. I'm paraphrasing, trying to remember exactly what you said, but you addressed this Galatians chapter 2 and 12. Did you not? And I asked you, bro, do you want to get into that now or later? And you said we can get into it now.
We're here because you wanted to be. I was being gracious because you wanted to take us there. All I need to know is why did Paul say that say that Titus wasn't compelled to be circumcised? If you know Torah, you know the answer. We don't need to waste any time.
Okay, but after we said we were going to move on from that, which you suggested, right? Remember you said we were going to move on from that, and then you mentioned this Galatians 2 and 12, bro. Come on, bro. Don't do the math thing to me, bro. This is this is your words, bro. This is your words. You brought up Galatians 2 and 12, and I specifically asked you, bro, do you want to get into that now?
Yeah, you have been controlling the conversation for the past probably 15 minutes. You've been expounding. Lord God, are you kidding?
You done? Now let me finish.
What are you talking about? Am I done? What are you talking about?
Now let me
listen. If you want to do a read through, of Galatians, let me sign off, and you can continue your read through. If you're here to defend Paul, let me cross check you. Let me cross examine you.
Okay, well, you brought this issue up, bro. Here's the real.
Let's do this.
You keep cutting me off, bro. I just let you say your piece.
Let's skip this portion.
No, we're not. That's not happening. We're going to deal with it. You brought it up. I specifically asked you if you wanted to address it now or later, and you said we can do it now.
How longer are you going to be?
Give me 3 minutes, and I'll be done.
How long do you expect to be on this live?
3 minutes. 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
How
3
long
minutes,
do you expect to be on this live?
Bro, you causing a disruption, and it's just showing
How
that you don't want me to
long do you expect to be on this live? Because I don't think I'm going to get halfway through my questions before you say, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to have to call it.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I had to mute the brother because he's being disorderly, as you see. Folks don't want to get to the truth. Now, I'll do these 3 minutes, and then he can go ahead and address the situation after. But he asked for this, and he's going to get this. For before there were certain came down from James, he did eat with the Gentiles. But when they were come, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing them which were of the circumcision. So now we have a dispute here, which he brought up between Peter and John. He said, oh, well, Peter was fickle. 1 minute Peter supported Paul, then the next minute they were fighting and all of that. So let's bring some clarity to this. See, they just want to throw out things real quick, and then when you get to address them, they don't want you to address them. And I'm surprised that bro would do that. And so actually, when you're dealing with this text, this is giving you a insight into actually what the issue that Paul is dealing with all throughout the rest of this book of Galatians. And we can determine that by he did eat with the Gentiles. Where's that in Torah? But when James came down, the just, who was keeping both the oral and the written Torah, the written and the oral Torah, Peter separated, playing the part of the hypocrite, because he was committing no sin in the first place, not eating with the Gentiles. That's the oral Torah. And that's what Paul is dealing with in a lot of his writings. He's dealing with the oral Torah and not that which is written in the law and the prophets. Now, let me unmute the brother so he can go. I'm on mute. You can go ahead and have your say. I'm going to put it on mute. You can go ahead and ask your next question or bring up your next issue.
Am I off mute now?
Yep, you're off mute and I'm going on mute. Just like I muted you, I'm gonna mute myself.
Oh my goodness. I can't believe we're doing that. All right. So if anybody who knows Galatians knows that Paul is writing this book to dissuade the Galatians from following the law, like all you want on the second half of chapter 2, it doesn't matter. In verse 16, Paul says, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by faith of Jesus Christ. And then he says at the end of the verses, for by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. That's a Pauline teaching. And he says the same thing. He says the same thing in Romans. I believe Romans.
I just got one thing to say, bro. Can you bring up the text so that we actually seeing the text and actually dealing with the scripture? And I mean, not the scripture, but the principles, and then we can go from there. I'm going back on mute.
If they have Bibles, they can look it up themselves.
Nah, it don't work that way, bro. We're here to discuss.
That's the way it's gonna work for me, because I'm not gonna share my screen. If they want to follow along in their Bibles, they can follow along in the Bibles. Otherwise, you can screen share for me. It's your platform.
Okay, that's cool. I'll screen share.
Good.
Just give me the text that you're talking about, and I'll put it on the screen and put my mic on mute so you can go through it.
I mean, you can listen along and scroll along as all you want. I'm moving. Like, and the thing is, I gotta do this, Sam, because you're gonna filibuster the whole time we're living. Like, how long do you expect to be on this? I'm not here for no beginners class. If you want to hold a read through of Galatians, you hold a read through of Galatians. I'm talking to you. I'm asking you to defend Paul. Everybody here should know Paul. If they're unfamiliar with Paul, they need to go read. Now I'm citing specific verses, and I'm asking you to answer to specific statements. Okay, that doesn't take reading the whole chapter. It's ridiculous. He says in verse 2:16, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law. Is that true? For by the works of the law shall no man be justified. In Romans, he says the same thing. Find it.
Can you state the text that you're talking about, bro? And I'll put
Galatians. Like, I'm moving, man. You can take notes, and then you can hit them as you want.
I'll post them. Listen, can I say something for like 10 seconds, and then I'll mute myself and let you go ahead and go forward. When we started this program, we specifically said that we would take each issue one by one. You already blasted out and said everything in a lump sum. You already said about 99 different texts and about 99 different arguments that you had against Paul. In order for us to get to the issue and get understanding, we have to take them one by one. So you make your issue, state the text that you want to support your issue, and then let me answer your issue.
So what I'll do is I'll pose the question, and if you think that my question is unfounded in Pauline writings, I will post the verses that my question is based off. So my question is a man not justified by the works of the law? Now that's from Galatians 2:16. Okay. And Romans 3:20, 3:28.
Hold on, bro. Hold on. You're going too fast for me, bro.
Write these down, because
I'm gonna explain. Bro,
this is what you're gonna explain.
Can you calm down 1 second, bro? I'm gonna type it into this blue letter Bible. It's gonna give me all of the verses in one, and I can put them on the screen at a time. If you just slow down, bro.
Fantastic.
Woo.
This is what happens when I feel like I've been played. You've been talking for the past 20 minutes, and it's not necessary.
Okay, cool. My bad.
I'll
let you go. Now, what's the text? Galatians.
There's a few texts.
Okay, give them to me. So I'm typing them all in here at one time, and I can put them on the screen.
Sure. Galatians 2:16.
16. Okay.
Okay.
Next.
Galatians 3:11.
Galatians 3:11. All right.
They all say the same thing.
Okay.
Romans 3:20.
Romans 3. 20.
And Romans 3:28.
Romans 3:28. Any other one that's going to support the work of the law? Because we want to deal with this works of the law before you move to something else.
The question is a man not justified by the law? All of those verses make statements regarding that.
Okay, so let me share my screen here. Oh, I'm already sharing. Oh, I didn't know that. My bad. Okay. Just so to be fair, so everyone can see what you're talking about, right? Galatians 2, you want to read them or you want me to read them? I just have the one verse. I'm not going to read the whole chapter right now. I'm just going to just read the verses that you just said. Galatians 2:16, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Yeshua HaMashiach. Even we have believed in Yeshua HaMashiach, that we might be justified by the faith of Christ and not by the works of the law. For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. Galatians 3:11. But that no man is justified by the law in the sight of God. It is evident, for the just shall live by faith. Therefore, Romans 3:20, therefore, by the deeds of the law, there shall no flesh be justified in his sight, for by the law is the knowledge of sin. Romans 3:28, therefore we conclude that a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law. Now you want to continue making your point and let me know when you want me to respond. I'm going on mute.
Is it true that a man is not justified by the law, by his works according to the law? Because that's what we're dealing with. And that's what I find this highly problematic. I find it highly problematic because there's a list of scriptures that tell me that that Elohim judges a man according to his works, and by his works a man is judged. Okay, so if we're talking about James, let me just because I hate to kind of turn over the mic without kind of saying a considerable piece. I didn't think you would take the mic and be so protracted with it. I figured you would have short, concise answers, but no problem. So James 2:24 fundamentally disagrees with Paul. He says, after bringing up examples about how Abraham's faith was justified by his works, how he was justified by his works and not only his faith, he says, ye see then how by works a man is justified and not by faith only. And rewind in verse 21, he says, was not Abraham our father justified by works when he had offered Isaac his son upon the altar? If we go to Deuteronomy 30:15-20, it talks about Moses is basically saying, I have before you life and death, and you can choose life and follow the commandments, or you can choose death and forsake them. And I'll read just a snippet, because when somebody says you're not justified by your works, then what are we justified by? The only thing we have is our works. We believe in the promises. We have faith and we believe in the promises of the covenant of Abraham, and because we believe, we live according to the law that was established in order to acquire those works. What Paul says in his documents, he makes a division. He says he pits following the law against having faith, and he says faith in Christ Jesus. Well, Hamashiach taught Torah. Why do I have to choose between following the law? Why does Paul make me choose between following the law and having faith? If I have faith in the covenant of the promises of the covenant that was established first with Abraham, I'm going to follow the law. And so the Most High, he makes that very clear. See, I've set thee this day life and good, and death and evil, and that I command thee this day to love the Lord thy God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commandments and statutes, that thou mayest live and multiply, and the Lord thy God shall bless thee in the land whither thou go to possess it. But if thy heart turn away, so that thou will not hear, but shall be away and worship other gods and serve them, I denounce unto you this day that ye shall surely perish, and that ye shall not prolong your days upon the land whither thou goest over the Jordan to possess it. I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. Okay, so our adherence to the law is going to justify whether we should be in the land or whether we should be partakers of the promises. Okay, that thou mayest love the Lord thy God, and thou mayest obey his voice, that thou mayest cleave unto him, for he is thy life and the length of thy days, and thou mayest dwell in the land, and the Lord swear unto the fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And and there are other scriptures. Deuteronomy 6:25. Moses defines righteousness. This will be our righteousness if we do all that we're commanded before the Lord our God. Okay, Deuteronomy 32. Deuteronomy 32, 46, 47. And Moses made an end of speaking all these words to Israel, and he said to them, set your hearts unto all the words which I testify to you this day, among you this day, which ye shall command your children to observe and do all the words of this law. For it is a vain thing, it is not a vain thing for you, because it is your life. And through this thing ye shall prolong your days in the land, whether ye go over the Jordan to possess it. Like he's telling them, like, follow these laws, because they're going to justify you staying in the land. The law does justify. And there's a whole list. Job 34:11. Let me just go through these, because I don't want this opportunity to go past. And this is what happens when I can't trust my interlocutor to be reasonable and pass the mic in a reasonable way. I have to sort of scrounge, and I have to sort of be hawkish about my speaking time. And I hate dialogue in this way. This is not an exchange. But let's do this. Job 34:11. I hate talking this way. This is not a dialogue. For the work of a man shall he render unto him, and cause every man to find according to his ways. For the work of a man he shall render unto him, and cause every man to find according to his ways. Judging a man by his works. Let's keep going. Ecclesiastes. Let's just go down the list. I have just a heads up. I have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I'm gonna go through them really quickly. I don't know if my point's gonna be able to be established if I don't get this out now, because you tend to go on these long diatribes. So I'm gonna get it out while I have the chance. I'm sorry if this is but I'm gonna prove my point that the law does justify a man, and you don't have to choose between faith in Jesus Christ and following the law. Hamashiach taught the law. So Ecclesiastes 3:17. I said in my heart, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time there for every purpose and for every work. Okay. Deuteronomy 6:1-2. And I hope everybody really listens to what I'm saying. Like, avoiding what Paul is saying is not going to make the words go away. They're going to be there. 6:1-2. Now these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments which the Lord your God commanded to teach you, that ye might do them in the land whither ye go to possess it, that thou might fear the Lord thy God, to keep all his statutes and commandments which I command thee, thou and thy son and thy son's son, all the days of thy life, and that thy days may be prolonged. Okay. Psalm 62 through 12. A man's works according to the law does justify him. It's not as Paul says. Psalm 62, 12. Also unto thee, O Lord, belongeth mercy, for thou renderest to every man according to his work. Jeremiah 17:10. Okay, you guys have this selective, like, you forget everything you read in the commandments and you want to justify Paul. He's not justifiable. That's why the Christians use him. That's why you can't seem to gain real estate, because he's not defensible. Jeremiah 17:10. I, the Lord, search the heart. I try the reins, even to give every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doings. Either you're condemned or you're justified. That's what that's talking about. Paul is wrong. Let's go to the next scripture. Proverbs 24. Proverbs 24:12. These aren't hard scriptures to understand. Like, you can share the scriptures, or you can just listen to me read. There's one common theme. A man is justified according to his works of the law. He's either justified as righteous or he's condemned as wicked, a sinner. Proverbs 24:12. If thou sayest, behold, we knew it not, does not he that pondereth the heart consider it? And he that keepeth thy soul, does he not know it? And shall not he render every man according to his works? Okay. Ezekiel. Let's go Ezekiel 18. And then we'll go to Ezekiel. We'll go to Ezekiel 36. And it shouldn't, I mean, like, everybody knows this. I'm just wondering what the response is. Here we go. We're going to read Ezekiel 18:19 through 23. Yet say ye, why does not the Son bear the iniquity of the Father, when the Son has done that which is lawful and right, and hath kept all my statutes, and has done them, his works, has done them, he shall surely live. Verse 20. The soul that sinneth it shall die. The Son shall not bear the iniquity of the Father, neither shall the Father bear the iniquity of the Son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon him. A man's righteousness justifies him. And you see that in Ezekiel 18:20. And the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon him. A man's wickedness condemns him. These are a man's works that the Most High is talking about. 21. But if the wicked will turn from all his sins, and that he hath committed, and keep all my statutes, and do that which is lawful and right, this is works, he shall surely live, he shall not die. He's being justified according to his righteous works. 22. All his transgressions that he hath committed, they shall not be mentioned unto him. In his righteousness that he has done, he shall live. It's clear. 23. Have I any pleasure at all that the wicked should die, saith the Lord God, and not that he should return from his ways and live? In 27, we'll go 27 to 32. And when the wicked man turneth away from his wickedness that he hath committed, and does that which is lawful and right, his works according to the law, he shall save his soul alive. He shall be justified. A man is justified by his righteous works according to the law. So verse 28, because he considereth and turneth away from his transgressions that he hath committed, he shall surely live, he shall not die. Do you hear that? He's telling us that he's going to justify a man by his works or this transgression according to the law. In verse 30, therefore I will judge you, O Israel, O house of Israel, everyone according to his ways. I will judge you, everyone according to his way. There's only two options from judgment: justification or condemnation. Repent and turn yourselves from all your transgressions, so iniquity shall not be your ruin. Cast away from all your transgressions, whereby ye have transgressed, and make you a new heart and a new spirit. For why will ye die, O house of Israel? I have no pleasure in the death of him who dieth, saith the Lord. Wherefore turn yourselves and ye live. So we'll go to Ezekiel 36. I hope you guys are seeing the point. Paul has diverted. Okay, 36 Ezekiel 36:19. And I scattered them among the heathen, and they were dispersed through the countries according to their way, and according to their doings, I judged them. Okay, let's go to and I'm going to show you that even Paul says this. He contradicts himself. But I bet I won't hear an explanation of why he contradicted himself. I bet we'll hear some excuse of how I've misunderstood. Now how unlearned I am. Matthew, let's go to Matthew 16:27. This is the Messiah speaking. For the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then shall reward every man according to his works. Works according to what? Is it not the law? So what is Paul talking about? Says it again in Revelation chapter 2. 2:23. He's addressing the church of Thyatira, talking about Jezebel, who has introduced eating things sacrificed to idols, which Paul doesn't see a problem with, and committing fornication. And I will kill her children with death, and all the churches shall know that I am he which searches the reins and hearts, and I will give unto everyone according to your works. Works according to what? It's not Torah. So what is Paul talking about? Let's go to Romans. Let's see the double speak that Paul gives us. Romans 2:6. Let's go from 5:6. 2:5:6. But after thy hardness and impenitent heart, thou treasurest up unto thyself wrath against the day of wrath and revelation of the righteous judgment of God, who will render to every man according to his deeds. Keep in mind that in the next couple chapters, he says the deeds of the law, no man shall be justified. At least twice in Romans. Therefore, we conclude that a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law. Kidding me? Second Corinthians. Selective acknowledgement. Y'all want to see it when you want to see it. If you have Torah, you have the guide rule. You don't need to rely on anything else. The Torah is your northern star. You can denounce anyone you can't. You can denounce anyone who goes against Torah, who says something that's not according to Torah. And Paul in Romans 2:320 and 3:28 has clearly gone against Torah. 2 Corinthians 11:15. I really hate to do it like this. Anyway, here we go. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. Works according to what? Is it not Torah? These are Paul's words. Okay, let's go to Timothy, 2 Timothy, who apparently is not written by Paul, even though it's signed by Paul. It's written by his disciples, according to Brother Sam Addison. Let's go there. 2 Timothy 4:14. He talks about Alexander the coppersmith doing him evil. He says, Alexander the coppersmith did me much evil. The Lord reward him according to his works. According to what? Works according to what standard? Is it not the law? So how come, and this is to sum up my point, and I'll hand it over. So how come we see almost 20 verses, 17, 20 verses, wherein a man is justified and judged according to his works against the law. But, and even Paul says this, okay, and for the record, I don't have a problem with that. I'm like, yeah, that's right. But then when we get to talking about justification, he says in verse 20, therefore by the deeds of the law there shall be no flesh justified in his sight. Verse 28, therefore we conclude that a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law. And we can go into his arguments. My hope was that we would go into this argument and discuss the individual statements that he makes. He builds an argument that can be quickly broken down. But you guys are so appalled. You're going to be like, oh, that's not true. All right. So let's hit these last verses in Galatians to show you that this isn't a fluke. Paul is doing this in more than one book. Galatians 2:16, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by faith of Jesus Christ. Even we have believed in Jesus Christ, that we might be justified by the faith of Jesus Christ, and not by the works of the law. For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. Jesus, Hamashiach, preached repentance to the law. What good is repentance if it's except but to justify a man? You repent back to the law so that you can produce righteous works according to the law, so that you can be justified according to the law and not condemned. Last scripture. Galatians 3:11. After he says, "O foolish Galatians, who hath bewitched you?" and he's saying, receive you the Spirit by works of the law or by hearing of faith. Like, why is he pitting them? Why is he pitting following the law against having faith? You have faith and you follow the law because you have faith in the covenant promises. But then he redefines the beneficiaries of the covenant, which is what I hoped to get on the table before this live was over. But I'm not sure the way that Sam he doesn't answer concisely. Let me finish though. Verse 11, but that no man is justified by the law in the sight of God, it is evident, for the just shall live by faith. Now he's quoting Habakkuk. He's quoting Habakkuk, a prophet of the law, who prophets preached repentance. Habakkuk, in his prophecy, he saw injustice in Jerusalem, in Israel. And Elohim told him, he told him that he was going to bring the Babylonian captives upon Jerusalem. And Paul does this also in Romans 1:6. He quotes Habakkuk again. These are the teachings of Paul. This is what Paul believes. This is what he teaches. Okay. So going back to Habakkuk, the just shall live by faith. Let's just go to those. He says, the upright of heart shall fall, but the just shall live by faith. Now, faith in what? What would an Israelite have faith? He's talking about the Chaldeans, how prideful the Chaldeans is. But if I'm an Israelite and I'm hearing that, he says, behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. If I'm an Israelite, I'm thinking, okay, the just shall live by faith. If I have faith in the covenant promises of Abraham, then I'm going to live justly according to the law in hopes that I am justified according to the law. But you lose sight of that in Pauline writings. And he uses all sorts of, he misquotes texts. In Romans 4, he misquotes, he mishandles Psalms 32:12. He quotes it out of context, talking about repentance, talking about blessed is the man whose sin is not imputed to. But it doesn't just he's not talking about any crucifixion. He's talking about repentance to the law, repentance from iniquity and transgression. Read It's Psalms 32:2 that he quotes that. And so if you read Psalms 32, 1-6, he is talking about repentance according to the law. Blessed is the man who repents. And if that's disputed, we can go to that text so you can see that is the very point that David makes. So this is what Paul does. He mishandles text and creates arguments based on statements that are not founded by the prophets. But I doubt I'll really get to hold Sam's feet to the fire, because he'll choose to talk and filibuster about something else. Sam, it's yours, man. I made my point.
Okay, that's a good stuff. So now you're dealing with this works of the law, right? Now let me show you something here. I'm about to put you on mute because you get ready to be real upset with me, bro. So I'm getting ready to school you on here and show you why you need the context and all of that, right? So first of all, what I want to do, I want to start with this Galatian text again, which he was trying to stop me from getting to and causing an uproar with, because this is going to give you some insight. It's Galatians chapter number 2. Matter of fact, I'm not even going to go there. We already know. Well, I'm already here now. But where they had the beef, right? The 2:14, where he said there was a contradiction at. This gives us some insight into what was going on in the first century and what Paul was preaching against. Now, first and foremost, let me say that I agree with everything Brother Pac said, that we are justified by doing what the law says, right? But Paul said the same thing. So what he don't understand is this other language in there dealing with these works of the law. And the reason why Brother Pac doesn't know, because Brother Pac doesn't deal with context. Now, let me put some context to this and clear this up for him, right? So now in Galatians, now, if he would have let me continue with Galatians, then he would understand what Paul was dealing with in Galatians. So these Galatians chapter number 2:16, Galatians 3:11 would have made a lot more sense to him if he would have just be quiet and read this whole chapter. Then it would have put the whole rest of the book in context. But this is the problem that you have. This is why Peter said the ignorant, the unlearned, and the unstable, right? I'm about to show you this, right? So now Paul is going against Peter for eating with Gentiles. If any of you guys out there can show me any verse in the written Torah, in the whole of Tanakh, that say you can't eat with Gentiles, I will gladly recant what I'm about to do to bro right now, right? So now, when you understand this, you'll understand that there were two Torahs in the first century, right? So the law that Paul is dealing with here is dealing with oral Torah. But Brother Pac don't know this because he don't study context. He don't study the history. He just stick his head into the Torah and think that he half understands something, half read what Paul says, and then run off with it instead of getting an understanding. Now, I posted an article in the group for those of you guys that are part of the Biblical Rumble Room group about hermeneutics, right? I'm not going to share it for the sake of time. But it's the 8 principles of hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is being able to, the interpretation of text, right? In the interpretation, you got to deal with the historical context as well as the contextual context. Now, you won't understand this unless you go to the history of the first century, right? Right now, I just told you guys something that you need to remember and that you could use for the Christian apologists and the Paul bashers. Paul wasn't talking about the law. We see a glimpse of this here in Galatians. What law is it that said a Yahudim cannot eat with the Goyim? You won't find it in all of Tanakh and Torah. But here's where you'll find it at, right? This guy, did I have it up here? Okay, right? Let's go to this. And this you can find in the Sephariah, right? So I'm going to prove my point here using the historical text in the Mishnah, right? This is supposed to be Rabbi Shimei, right? He was the first century. We're going to get into that. The sages taught that there was an incident involving, and there's more than one account of this as well. The sages taught that there was an incident involving one Gentile who came to Shimei. The Gentile said to Shimei, "How many Torahs do you have?" He said to him, two, the written Torah and the oral Torah. Right? Right? So in the first century, the Yahudim believed that Moshe was given a secret oral Torah that he passed down only to a select few, the Levites and a select other few, and the written Torah was just for the general masses. Now, this is what Paul was dealing with. In that oral Torah, it says that you can't eat with Gentiles. That's where you'll get that from, right? Right. And also with Paul, when Paul was dealing with the works of the law, he was dealing with the translations of written Torah that was in the oral Torah. I'll say that again for those of you guys that may not have caught that. When Paul is dealing with the works of the law, he's dealing with the oral Torah. That's why he can say by the deeds of the law. You know why? Because James and Peter were still following oral Torah. And that's why Peter got rebuked to his face. Because the oral Torah is not that which is written. Those of you guys that have your Bible, go to Matthew chapter number 15, which is Hamashiach is quoting Isaiah, I believe it's chapter number 41, where he says, your tradition and your commandments of men cause you to transgress the law or the Torah of the Most High. So now we got an example. Matter of fact, let me go there. Since he took this time, I'm going to show you guys step by step. And this is how you deal with the Bible. And like I said, once again, it just comes from ignorance. Now, that's my brother. I'm not being derogatory. Ignorant is not in the negative sense. It just means he don't know. That's all. Right? So now let's go to Matthew chapter number 15. Let me prove my point. Of what the Hamashiach was talking about. I just gave you Galatians chapter number 2 with Peter sitting around eating with Gentiles and then jumping up acting like it's the same when James came, right? Right. Now we have Matthew chapter number 15. Then came to Yeshua scribes and Pharisees, which were of Yerushalayim, saying, why do thy disciples transgress the what? The Torah? The tradition of the elders. That's the oral Torah. The law, for they wash not their hands when they eat bread. That's that second Torah, right? But he answered and said unto them, why do ye transgress the commandments of Elohim by your oral Torah, by your tradition? Right? Because they had all of these writings from the elders and all of this that they got from Babylon, their interpretation of the law. This is what Paul was talking about in Colossians, the 2nd chapter, when he say he abolished the handwriting and ordinances. When you look up that word ordinance, matter of fact, we're going to do that in a minute. But let me jump to this. Let me show you.
You don't even believe Paul wrote Colossians.
I didn't cut you off. So, let me meet you real quick. So now I told you guys he was going to be upset. I told you, right? So now let's go to Isaiah chapter number 40 real quick. Let's go to, and I never said Paul didn't write Colossians. That's one of the ones that I said that he did write, right? So anyway, Isaiah chapter, I told you guys he was going to be pretty mad. Isaiah chapter number 40. And I told you guys that Paul bashing comes from ignorance, just like Peter said, right? I think it's chapter number 40 or 41. 40 is going to be, it's going to be 41 then. Comfort you, my people. No, my bad. 39. Isaiah chapter number 39, right? Because we're getting into the second Isaiah. Isaiah chapter number 39. Behold, the days coming. You know what? I'm going to show you guys something real quick. This is how we're going to do this. Why did you transgress that? But he answered to them, you transgress the commandments of the Most High by your tradition. Here we go. Click on this, right? Show you guys how to do a real Bible study, right? This people draw nigh to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Let's see where this came from. Oh, I did it wrong. Cross-reference. I guess a better way of doing this, but I'm trying to rush into time, right? Isaiah 29. There we go. 13. Wherefore, Yahuwah said, for as much as this people draw not near me with their mouth, and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precepts of men. So we know that during the time of just before the during the time of the Babylonian captivity, somewhere around 500. So at least for 500 years before Hamashiach, these people had this oral Torah that they was placing over the word, over the written Torah, over that which is written in the law and the prophets. They said they had some secret knowledge that the elders had the way and the truth. They're going to tell us how to keep the commandments when Moshe was already given instructions on how to do so. This is what both Hamashiach and Paul himself was dealing with. He wasn't dealing with Torah. Oh, but let me prove it to you some more, right? Just hold on 1 second, right? Shemaiah, when was he born? This guy that was talking about the two Torahs, let's see if he was in the 1st century. What does that say right there? 50 BCE through 30 CE. See, folk don't study. You see what I mean? They just don't study, right? It's just ignorance. I ain't mad at my brother, but I'm about to school him, though, like I promised him, though. So now we know that Shemaiah lived in the 1st century, right? And Shemaiah, who was a Yahudim, matter of fact, he was a teacher, right? In the 1st century, right? He's teaching these two Torahs in the 1st century, the same time that Hamashiach is doing his ministry, and both Paul. So we know this oral Torah was a factor there. We know that there's no commandment in Torah not to eat with the Goyim, right? That comes from the oral Torah, right? Now let's see where these works of the law come from. You don't find these works of the law anywhere else in any book of the Bible, period, right? You can't find them. Peter didn't talk about them. Hamashiach didn't talk about them. James didn't talk about them. So now, let me open up your understanding, you guys.
Why are you spending so much time in this?
Dude, I didn't cut you off, homie. Stop it.
You are filibustering, bro. Why are you?
Okay, I had to mute the brother. So now, you guys notice I gave him his time. I told you guys he was going to be pretty mad. But anyway, so now, let's go to these works of the law, right? Paul talked about these works of the law. By the works of the law shall no flesh be saved. After he told you in Romans 2:13 that the doers of the law shall be justified. After and all of that a man is going to be justified by his deeds. Is he given a contradiction? Is it a contradiction? Well, let's see. It's a contradiction to those folks that lack understanding because they don't study, right? Now, let's see what these works of the law is, right? The works of the law that Paul was referring to is, let me pull it up here for you guys. The works of the law that Paul was referring to is called Miksat Ma'as HaTorah, right? And a lot of folks didn't know this until the Dead Sea Scrolls was found, right? The Dead Sea Scrolls was found, I think, 1950, something like that. And guess what they came up with? They came up with these writings from the 1st century that talked about the works of the law. Miksat Ma'as HaTorah means pertinent works or precepts of the law. It's also translated by many scholars as the works of the law, right? So this is what Paul would have been talking about when he was dealing with the works of the law. By the works of the law shall no flesh be saved, right? Now let's see what these works of the law is. First of all, let's get an understanding with this Dead Sea Scrolls 4Q MMT manuscript. Well, actually, it's a letter. It's a letter that the Essenes wrote to the Pharisees, trying to school them on how to keep the law. This is what Paul was talking about. Also, let me go here real quick. I'm gonna just go here. I'm coming right back because there's some good stuff for you guys, right? Hopefully, and it's some good stuff that you use on these pagan Paulinian Christians who want to run around talking about, see, Paul said the law was over with, and those that want to Paul bash. Some of our brothers, Hebrew brothers, that want to Paul bash, right? So now let's go to Colossians chapter number 2. I believe I want verse number 14. give you guys something real quick here, and then I'm gonna let the brother go ahead and make another argument that I'm gonna nail down as well. Okay, now here we say blotting out. I had a Christian apologist by the name of Matt Salih, So Real, aka So Real. Yeah, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us. Y'all Hebrews know they use this against y'all, right? But they use it out of ignorance because they don't know. They just have no understanding whatsoever, right? So the handwritten ordinances, this is what this is saying, that was blotted out, that was against us, right? The ordinance, number one, is not a law, right? Let's see what the ordinance is. This is how you do a Bible study, right? Let's click on his tools. Let's go to Interlinear. And this is Blue Letter Bible. It's free for everybody. You can just get it, and it's a great tool, right? Ordinance means dogma. It means teachings. So it's not actually the law. It's folks' opinions and teachings about the law. So that what Paul was talking about was nailed to the tree. He was talking about that oral Torah and these works of the law that these Essenes had, that they were in the cave about a 1 day's journey from Jerusalem, right? So now don't take my word to it. Let's click on this word dogma, right? It's going to give you a definition of this word dogma, so you guys can see that I'm telling you what I know because I study, right? So anyway, this ordinance is the Greek word. I'm not too strong on the Greek. I won't even stunt and tell you that I am. It's dogma, right? That one was simple. Ordinance, a public decrees, the Roman senator or ruler, rules or requirements of the law of Moses carrying a suggestion of severity or threatened judgment of certain decrees of the apostles relative to right living. Right now, if we click on this word, it comes from the base of G1380. Now, if you know anything about the languages, Greek is somewhat similar to the Hebrew, and that is the root words. All of the words go back to a root word, right? So we click on this root word, right? Let's click on that and see what it say there. This word ordinance come from, right? Let's see what it do there, right? Seem, suppose, seem good, please, to think, right? To be of an opinion, right? To think, to suppose, to seem, to be accounted, reputed, to seem, to judge. So what's going on here is Paul in this text is dealing with people's opinion about how to keep the law. Which the Pharisees had their opinions, the Sadducees had their opinions, the Essenes had their opinions. Everybody have an opinion. Just like today, you got your Methodist, your Baptist opinion, your Nazarene Hebrew opinion, your Camp Hebrew opinion. You got a multiplicity of opinions, right? Right? Multiplicity of opinions. The only thing that matters is that which is written in the law. Now that I showed you guys that, let me go ahead and prove that, right? Let's go back to this MMT document, which they found in 1953 and 1969, and it sheds a lot of light on what Paul meant by the works of the law. So when he's saying the works of the law, he's not talking about Torah. He's talking about that oral Torah, which later became the Talmud and the Mishnah and all of that, which I just read to you guys here. This stuff here, this is all the oral Torah. The sages taught, see what I mean? The sages. Who the heck cared what the sages taught? You know, and this is what, I mean, we care because these are our ancestors, you know, we can get some historical data from there. But as far as interpreting the text, let the text itself interpret the text. You don't need no Talmud. You don't need no Mishnah. You don't need no 4 MMQ documents, right? All you got to do is let the text interpret itself. And so this is the oral Torah that they was dealing with. When you're looking at this 4QMMT document that was found in Cave 4, that's what 4Q means, cave number 4 in the Qumran caves. But the MM2 means Miksat Ma'as HaTorah, some precepts of the Torah or pretty much works of the law. This is what Paul is actually referring to. It is translated by a lot of scholars as works of the law. It was around in the 1st century. If we look at this, it says 4QMMT is a reconstructed composite text from fragments of 6 separate manuscripts discovered in Cave 4 of Qumran. The 6 fragmented manuscripts are designated You guys can read that on your own. This is because I don't want to take up all the time and put you guys to sleep at 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock and all that. But this is Wikipedia. Go ahead and Wikipedia your 4QMMT so that you know that I'm not tripping, right? Now let's look at the dating of this manuscript. This is what I want to get to. Although the original composition of the text was around 150 BCE, right? So this is, remember, this manuscript is actually a letter that these Essenes wrote to the Pharisees saying, y'all not keeping the law of Moses the right way. We're going to write you a whole bunch of ordinances and all of that to show you really how it's done. That's what that's all about. Estimated the dates of the copying of these particular 6 manuscripts actually ranges from what? 75 BCE to 50 CE, which puts that directly during the time of Paul and Hamashiach, right? So now let's take a look at some of these works. I should have it up here somewhere. Here we go. This should give us some of these works, right? For those of you guys that want these links to what have you, I'll be certain to share the links. Just shoot me an email or a message or something, and I'll get this information to you, right? But part B of this 4QMMT, I think this would be 4QMMT-B. It says the halakha, and that's the way, MMT concerning the temple, same language in the Talmud and all of that. This is just the Essenes Talmud because they didn't accept the Pharisees. Concerning the temple cult, and most are related to biblical laws. See what I mean? These are these folks' opinions about the law, which is called the works of the law, just so happen. As understood by the sect, the following halakha are extant in the order of their appearance in the text. Gentile grain should not be brought into the temple. Where's that in Torah? This is the works of the law that Paul was talking about. A fragmentary halakha about the cooking of offerings, right? A fragmentary halakha about sacrifices by Gentiles, by Goyim. Cereal offerings should not be left overnight. None of this stuff you're going to find in Torah. This is these people's opinions and extra rules and regulations, which was actually much more stricter than the Pharisees themselves. Much more stricter. The Pharisees, y'all ain't doing this right. Several halakha concerning purity of skin, the place of slaughtering and offering of animals, slaughtering pregnant animals, forbidden sexual union, for banning the blind and deaf from the purity of the temple. It doesn't say the blind and deaf can't come into the temple. It said they can't be priests. That's what it says in Torah. The purity of streams of liquid. These guys believe that the liquid was in itself was impure. That if you had a cup that was impure, the impurities could travel up through the liquid, and so you had to keep pouring it. A whole bunch of nonsense. Dogs should not enter into Yerushalayim. Dogs. Nowhere in Torah will tell you this stuff. The fruit of the 4th year is given to the priest. The cattle tithe is to be given to the priest. Several regulations about the impurities of lepers during the period of purity. Why do we need this? Leviticus tell us exactly, the Torah tell us exactly how to deal with the tithe. It tells us exactly how to deal with the purifications and all of that kind of stuff. Why do you need somebody else reinterpreting for you outside of Moshe? This is what Paul was talking about. The impurity of human bones. Marriage between priests and Israelites are forbidden. So this is what it's talking about, right? The language, the constitution of MMT, and the study of, it was another part in here that I wanted. Oh, that was it. Where it goes down and talks about the law. So this is the works of the law that Paul was talking about. But my brother here don't have that understanding. So that's why he thinks Paul is conflicting himself when in Romans 2, he's telling you that they that do the law is going to be justified. And then at the same time saying, but by the works of the law shall no man be justified. Those works of the law. Now, this is not all the time. And this is why I told Brother Pac it would have been to his advantage to actually read the context. See, if he actually read the context, He could have pulled my card on a couple of these and said, well, Sam, that's not every time in the text, or at least tried to, because I study, so I know what Paul was saying there as well, because I read the context. But now, even if Paul did say, you are not justified the law does not justify anyone in itself. Obedience to the law is what justifies. And in certain contexts, this is what Paul was saying. Just knowing that it's a crime to drive over the speed limit does not keep you out of jail. Just knowing that, if you're doing it. So the law, by the law comes the knowledge of sin. So just because you know what a crime is, that doesn't keep you free. What keeps you free is not breaking those laws. You see what I mean? And so bro don't have this understanding whatsoever. And so just to recap and let this brother go and bring up some more charges against Paul so I can address them, because he went to that Corinthians as well. Paul said that they can eat unclean meats and things. That's not what Paul said. And he didn't. He has no understanding of that text as well, because he don't read context and he don't really have a handle on Torah. So I'm waiting for that argument if he want to present it, if he hasn't already disappeared on me from this black eye that he just took here. So now, once again, Galatians 2, if he would allow me to read that, Galatians 2 gave us a clue into what Paul was talking about in the rest of the book, because there's no law in the whole of Torah, the whole of Tanakh, that says you can't eat with Gentiles. So that tells you proof in itself. That's the internal evidence, the Bible itself, the book. Right? Which I like to start with, the Bible. Then when we go to the external evidence, we find that there were two Torahs in the first century. There was an oral Torah and there was the written Torah. The oral Torah was the traditions of men that Isaiah condemned, the Ruach through Isaiah condemned, that Hamashiach condemned himself in Matthew chapter number 15, and that Paul was condemning Peter for following as well. That's what Paul was talking about in his writings, that oral Torah and these works of the law by these Essenes. Now, let's see if the brother can come up with something else here for me to go ahead and school him on and let him know what's going on. You got the floor. You got the floor. Are you still there, brother Pacroseeno, or are you out? Oh, I guess he got I guess he's out of here. Okay, so he's in the chat room. So I guess he's done speaking. So I'm gonna go ahead. We've already been on here for 2 hours anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead. If you guys have any questions out there, like to say peace to brother Troy Kelly. I see you in the building. Brother Welsh, I see you in the building. Truth Seek, I see you in the building. Appreciate it. Sister Sheik, I see you there, sis. I appreciate it. Brother Vinny, everyone that came out. For those of you guys that are taking a look at this video, I'm done. You can go ahead and I guess the brother is done. He's got the knockout blow. So that was I guess he's done. So if you have any questions, you can always email us at defendersoftheway@gmail.com. Please go ahead, like and share this video, subscribe to the channel so we can keep bringing you truth and help tools to help you defend the way. If anyone want to come on the platform, I'm getting ready to close this out. You got questions, you want to have something to say, you're welcome to come on before I close this out. I appreciate everyone coming out. Please don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell button so you can be updated with all of the events. All right. So I guess I'm going to say shalom.